what's up with y'all? Hope y'all doing well today. So in this video, I'm going to show y'all how to make a beat for Fivio and Lil Tjay, and overall just like a New York drill type of beat. And I'm going to show y'all my whole process of how I made it from scratch all the way through making each of the melodies and adding drums to it. And I'm not going to say too much else. So with all that being said, let's just hop right into the sample. Alright, so for this sample, as y'all can tell, it's actually pretty straightforward in terms of like the layers and what each of them are doing. Just to go over a quick overview, I have a basic strings melody, some bass piano notes, a piano counter melody, the octave down version of that, couple violin accents, and a sub bass. So before I break anything else down, I just want to quickly discuss the tempo. For this beat, I chose a tempo of 146 beats per minute. Most of the drill beats that I'm familiar with range between like 135 and like 150 beats per minute. Obviously, there's no specific rule for it, but usually those types of tempos tend to work the best. So going into the first melody sound here, I got this strings preset from Omnisphere. The name of this is Adagio
Espressivo.
So going into the MIDI for that pattern, I made the MIDI for the first pattern here in C sharp minor. So I think this and the next couple melodies were originally made in C sharp. So I pretty much just used a handful of notes like I normally do for like my darker melodies. So I started with the root note, of course, which is C sharp, and then I moved to the second note in the scale, which is D sharp, and then the fifth, which is G sharp. So along with this first triad, I put an octave to that C sharp up here. So with the second half of the first measure here, I'm going back up to E for the triad. I move the top note and I move that up by 1/2 step. So in this case, from G sharp to A, and then back to G sharp to kind of resolve to that minor chord that we're used to hearing. And then I just took this bass here and I pasted it over here. And then, like I said earlier, I just changed the top notes. Instead of having the descend, I just have the ascend be the main focus. I only constructed the first two and then I just copied it over for the remaining 6. And I just went in and adjusted some of the velocities on some of these upper notes just so they pop a little more in the final loop. So before I put any effects on it, this is what it sounds like. So for effects, I put on this EQ, I put in a low cut, a bit of a high shelf to cut out some of those treble harshness, and a cut here in like the high mid areas, again, just to cut out some of those more harsher frequencies. Next, I put in halftime. I put the loop setting to 4 bars and left everything else the same. So with both those effects on it, they sound like this. So after putting in the first string melody, I opened up Keyscape and got this rich ballad piano preset. I just took the root note of C sharp. I put it in a few different octaves, so the 3rd, 4th, and 2nd octaves. Just adjusted the 2nd and 4th octaves so that they're a little lower than the 3rd. So once I had those first 2 stems down, I rendered each of them out as audio clips and I put them into the playlist. I went into the mode and set them to stretch and turn the pitch up by 100 cents on both of them. So the rest of the sample and the beat are both in D minor now. So moving on to the next melody sound, I opened up the same piano preset as the bass notes and I just put in this top melody. For the most part, I'm using those same scale degrees I did in the first melody. So it's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and the octave. And using this, as you can tell, I just put in like a repetitive pattern. And then I also randomized these velocities here at the bottom. So I hit Alt R on my keyboard, only left the level sections on and adjusted the velocity knob right here. So before putting any effects on it, this is what it sounds like. I put on some shaper box on the 4-key Melo preset. I just put a low cut on it to get rid of some of those more bassy frequencies. So with the effects, this is what the keys now sound like. So I went to the mixer track, armed it, and then hit Alt R, and then hit Start to render that out as an audio clip. So I put that into the arrangement, and then I copied it over to the left, and then I clicked the top left here and hit Make Unique. And then I went into the setting and set the mode to stretch, put the pitch range to 12 and all the way up. So I basically just pitched it up an octave. And then after I had that piano melody down, I went to Splice and I grabbed a drill violin sample and I ended up reversing it and chopping it up. I opened up the audio clip settings, again set the mode to stretch and pitched it to key, and then hit reverse, and then took those two slices and put it together with what we had so far. After putting in the violin sample, the last element of the sample that I put in was the sub bass, and this is using the Megatron sub bass from DB's District Kit, and I went in and put in this pattern right here. And in order to get those notes to glide, I went to the wrench section of the audio settings here, and I went to the polyphony section and turned on the portamento and the mono and just left this slide as is. So once I had each of those, I arranged the stems to my liking. I added my drums and accents and pretty much just finished the rest of this beat all in just one FLP. So now going into the drums here, the first sound that I added was this bell sound. I just had it hit on the first beat on each 4 measures, and then this little lead in here at the end. After the bell, I put in my 2 snares, which I layered together. The first is this Perc sounding snare, and I layered it with this one. So putting both of them together, this is what the combined MIDI sounds like. So if y'all know me, this is a little different than the normal trap pattern that I normally do, where I just have the claps hitting on each of the 3rd beats of all the measures. But in drill, it's a little different. You also see that the hi-hat pattern and the kick and 808 patterns are also slightly different. The snare will hit on the 3rd beat and the 8th beat. And also these notes with like lower velocity here are just meant to use as accents and just add a little bounce. You'll kind of see as I'm adding the other drum elements. For my next drum sound, I got this snare sounding hi-hat. And with this, I put in my hi-hat pattern, and as you can kind of tell if I zoom in, it also doesn't look like a typical trap hi-hat. So typically the trapped hi-hat are structured like this where they're evenly spaced, but in drill, you kind of swing the notes like this, so you leave 2 lines in between instead of 1. And then I just went in and kind of filled in some of those gaps and added some rolls. After adding the hi-hats, I put in my snare. And with this one, I was just filling in the empty spaces of the hi-hat. I didn't have a certain method to it. I just kind of heard where I wanted to place them in my mind, and I just placed them accordingly. And also similar to the other drum sounds, I am adjusting the velocity quite a bit so that some of the drum hits have more emphasis than the other. After adding that pattern in, I then added my kick in. For the most part, this kind of just layers with the 808, and it also feeds into some of the bounce that I have with the snares and the hi-hat. And then for my last sound, I grabbed this 808. For this, I had a 16 bar pattern, but for the most part, it's pretty much just like these same core notes here, copied over, and then I just added different rolls every other measure. For these rolls, I went in and used the 1/2 step snapping, and I also cut them kind of short just because I feel like they sounded a little better if I cut them off slightly early instead of having each of them decay for like the full length of the note. I also sidechained my kick to my 808, so how I ended up doing that is I went to my mixer here, I went to the kick channel, and then I went to the 808 here where it has this arrow. I right clicked on it and hit sidechain to this track. Then I opened up a limiter in the kick. I went to the comp tab here and I selected the sidechain by right clicking and going to the kick. And then I used the threshold, ratio, and release knobs to get the sidechain that I wanted on the 808. So pretty much what this threshold knob does is it tells the limiter at what point does the sidechain engage. The ratio just tells the limiter by how much should the 808 be compressed by, or how much it should turn down when the kick hits. And then the release just tells it how fast this slope right here should come back in, so how fast the 808 should come back in after the kick. And then after that, I just added like a couple risers and some ear candy, and that was pretty much the rest of the beat. So that's gonna do it for this one. I hope y'all enjoyed it and found it pretty helpful. Let me know any thoughts, feelings, recommendations you have for me in the comments, and that's gonna wrap it up for this one. So I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Roll up, Tez.